Well, good afternoon, and thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Kevin Moran, and I'm a director here at ULI Philadelphia. I'm also joined by one of our technical assistance panel committee co-chairs, Al Federico, who will be leading part of today's presentation as well. I just thought before we jumped right into the exploration of technical assistance panels specifically, I wanted to take a step back and just share a little bit of information about the Urban Land Institute and ULI Philadelphia specifically. So the Urban Land Institute, for anyone who might not be familiar, is a mission-driven membership and nonprofit association with a mission to shape the future of the built environment for transformative impact in communities worldwide. We are an organization of about 45,000 members around the world and about 900 members locally or regionally. It's important to note that our region, the ULI Philadelphia region, includes 4 satellites as well. So we cover the Philadelphia metropolitan region, but we also serve members in the central Pennsylvania area, Delaware, the Lehigh Valley, and southern New Jersey. As an organization, ULI is very intentionally interdisciplinary in its practice. And so our members are everyone who touches the real estate and land use process from start to finish. So that includes, developers, lenders, architects, planners, both from the public sector and the private sector. And that's what makes ULI relatively unique in the sort of association world. And we apply that same type of interdisciplinary model to all of the work that we do through our technical assistance panel program as well. Everything we do is really member driven within ULI. And so I mentioned we have about 900 members in the Philadelphia region. That's supported by about 3 full-time staff. But really everything we do, as you can imagine, is driven by those members. And so we have about 20 different committees or councils. They range from topically oriented subgroups of members that explore issues like housing and community development and life sciences, to operational committees like the Technical Assistance Panel Committee that helps really lead and drive forward our technical assistance work within ULI Philadelphia. So that's a really broad stroke picture of who ULI and ULI Philadelphia is. I'm always happy to sort of dive a little bit deeper into the organization whenever helpful, but I want to be mindful of everyone's time and really jump into the real meat of today's conversation, which is exploring our technical assistance panel program. So with that, I'd love to turn things over to Al Federico, co-chair for ULI Philadelphia's technical assistance panel program. And I hate to do it, but I think you're muted, Al.
And it's recorded. Excellent. Thank you, Kevin. Kevin indicated, I'm going to my 2nd year as co-chair for the Technical Assistance Panel Committee. I've also served on the committee and participated in several TAPs. Actually, in that slide, I'm the 2nd one in from the right. That was out in West Whiteland. So go ahead, Kevin, you can flip the slide. So the technical assistance panel, and I'm not going to actually read these slides. I think Kevin did a really nice job putting these together, explaining what is a panel. But I mean, in a nutshell, it is a group of highly qualified professionals that have a great interest in the various aspects of land development and land uses that are volunteering their time to help either a local government or a nonprofit agency explore and try to guide solutions to various land development issues. And as outlined on the slide, they could be corridors or specific properties, potential reuses, economic issues, land development proposals, and a range of other things, as long as it is in land use and within the professional bounds of our diverse membership, which includes engineers, architects, financiers, land use attorneys. We really can provide a great cross-section of knowledge to some of these issues. Kevin? So the way a panel will work, I mean, the first step is we need to be asked. We are a volunteer organization, and we are not going out and just picking picking issues. There needs to be a sponsor that has an interest in working with us, and who has an issue that is, again, within the realm of what we do. Once the sponsor and the actual scope of work have been identified, ULI staff will put out a call for volunteers from within our membership. Depending on what we're looking at, we may curate the type of volunteers we're looking at. For example, that picture that on the slide is from 69th Street Terminal in Upper Darby Township. It was looking at how to not really revitalize the space, but make better use of the space and the retail that's in there. So the group that we picked in that area, was heavy on our retail, leasing, land use. Even though it was a transit station, it wasn't really a transit or transportation type project. So the panel, typically it's 2 days. Obviously, over the last couple of years, we've developed ways to do this in a hybrid manner. Personally, I would prefer in person. I think that gives you a much better feel and interaction of the group, but we understand that sometimes accommodations need to be made, and I think the ULI staff did a wonderful job in putting it together in a way that we could do hybrid taps. As it's laid out here, there'll be a series of briefings. We will look at some of the background information before we get there. Stakeholder interviews, very important. In the TAPs I've been involved with, it's amazing how much you actually get. One, not just from listening to people, but bringing the diverse stakeholders into a room. It's surprising how many people in a single specific area rarely talk to each other about these issues. So it's almost as much learning for the participants as it is for us. And then the panel itself will reconvene, go through everything we've seen, heard, come up with our initial recommendations and presentations, which we will present back to the sponsor and as many of the stakeholders and other members of the public that want to participate. And then we will take it back. And Kevin, I mean, what's the turnaround? About 2 months to get the deliverable final report. We bring on a professional report writer who will put this together in a very nice format. Really, I'm not aware of any other programs like this. It is a reasonably simple application process. So I'm breaking all the rules here. And it is driven by the sponsor and what you're trying to accomplish. Our staff will help refine maybe the questions, because occasionally some of the questions come in that are too broad or not actually in the wheelhouse of the ULI membership. But then when we come in, this is an honest and open look. You're going to get 10, 12 professionals with really diverse but interrelated backgrounds that are going to give you their honest opinions. And because it's quick, which is really great. I mean, often you do these planning studies and maybe they're more heavy on process, and then by the time you get the final product and it goes on a shelf, I mean, you're getting something out of this within days. So that's, I think, again, very unique in the way we present this product. Okay. So as I said, you've got senior ULI members who are volunteering their time. I would agree. I mean, if you take a look at who participates on the TAP panels and you look at their hourly rates and you add it all up, you're really getting, I would suggest, good value. for your investment. Again, it's a good process. It brings a lot of people together in a pretty efficient way. And then ultimately you're provided with a written document that you can then use moving forward. Again, because the sponsors know the area, we do ask the sponsors to really give us the list of stakeholders. We will occasionally provide some suggestions as to maybe not specific people, but the types of, we need business owners, we need property owners, we need leasing agents. It depends. We need, community organizers. We may give you some guidance on who would be beneficial to have, but it's really the stakeholders that are bringing the people in. Again, also briefing materials, often, areas have planning studies that have been done before, comprehensive plans, or even the local land use codes, depending on what we're looking at. That sort of information our panel will take a look at before we get in. And then, of course, we ask the sponsors to participate.
That's really quickly, if you don't mind just jumping into, I think it's important to kind of note that unlike a typical sort of consultation arrangement where there's a client and a provider, we really see TAPs much more through the lens of a partnership. And so we would sort of, there's a model in place. We're here to support and to really produce a kind of independent set of recommendations for a sponsor. But along the way, we really look for the sponsor to participate in those activities as well, like Al mentioned, and helping to kind of shape who are the stakeholders that the panelists will talk to. What is the important background information that our panelists need to kind of review in order to be effective in developing a set of their own recommendations. And we really do that hand in hand with the sponsor. And we have templates for everything. There's a model, and we really help kind of coordinate and provide a significant amount of logistical support along the way. But it truly is more of a partnership than anything else. So I'll turn it back over to Al.
Really, because I thought that was my last slide.
You're right. You're right. It basically is. And I'll also mention too, so for all of those services, and then as you can imagine, there is a pretty significant sort of hard costs that are associated with delivering these. We do ask the sponsors to provide a $15,000 cash, what we call a cash match for the program as well. We're pretty transparent about that. About 10,000 of that is hard costs that really go into some of the logistics of the convening and producing the final report. And about 5,000 of that helps cover the soft costs related to ULI's operating the program. And then this really just paints a little bit of a graphical sort of picture of what the entire process looks like, starting with sponsor engagement. We then spend some time really kind of assembling the TAP, and then usually with about 2 months lead time, we're able to kind of 2 to 3 months, I would suggest, then sort of meet on site and conduct the TAP over a 1 to 2 day period. I'm sorry, over a 2 to 3 day period. And then about 2 months after that, we produce a final report with all of those recommendations. So with that, I'll sort of just spend a little bit of time going over the application process itself, the nuts and bolts of how to actually apply. We do try to keep this an intentionally simple process. I just wanted to underscore something that Al already mentioned in terms of eligible applicants, because it is such a service that's provided at a discounted value, and our members are volunteering their time. We really target these to organizations that are either nonprofits or government agencies themselves. And you can actually learn more about the TAP program, eligibility, see past reports on our website under the resources tab. But here's the timeline for the next round of applications. And I should say, just to sort of take a step back, there's always a round open. And so just because you are able to meet this deadline, or if you're unable to meet this particular deadline, know that immediately after this cycle, there's a new cycle that opens. The general cadence of how we review applications is that we'll accept them every spring for, I'm sorry, every summer for fall engagements, and every winter for spring engagements. Sorry, that got a little complicated. But this is how that actually plays out here. So on January 1, we opened our sort of current round of applications. Today, we're hosting an informational webinar about the TAP process. In late April, we'll ask anyone who is in fact interested in applying for a technical assistance panel to set up a one-on-one meeting with ULI staff. And this is really just an initial gut check to ensure that the set of scope questions are in fact solvable by a panel of 10 to 12 ULI members over the course of 2 to 3 days. That's kind of the framework in which we use to evaluate projects. We would then ask for folks to submit the application, which is really just effectively a 2-page narrative by the end of May. We then have ULI members review all of those applications, kind of, again, do a second gut check to make sure we feel that the scope as applied for is in fact something that ULI members could respond to in an effective way. We would also set up a time for applicants to meet with ULI member volunteers as well during that period, just to kind of review the scope questions and see if there's any questions that they can, if there's any questions of our TAP committee volunteers that they can respond to. I will say this is a process that almost always ends up in sort of stronger in a stronger set of scope questions than when they're initially applied for. And I say that because our TAPS committee is made up of a lot of it's a good subsection of ULI members, and it reflects the type of panelists that might be selected to work directly with the community. And so it's a way for TAP members to kind of read your scope questions without having a whole lot of context on the project itself, and make sure they're clear and that the members who would be serving as panelists kind of understand them and are on the same page as the sponsor is sort of intending them to be read, right? So it's a good opportunity to make sure that there's kind of clear understanding between both the sponsor and potential panelists. By the end of June, we would sort of notify everyone of whether or not they were selected, and then try to schedule these over a 2 to 3 day period between September and December. We're usually able to accommodate about 2 to 3 taps in each window. And we really try to work with sponsors to kind of get over the finish line. It's not necessarily a competitive process, but it's one where, we really work to make sure it's a strong match. And so oftentimes, we find that the scope is just far too large for a technical assistance panel, or it's not really related to land use, and we're concerned that that we would be able to kind of deliver the type of recommendations that would actually be effective for a sponsor. And so that's really what this process is intended to kind of sort out of whether it's a really strong match. This just gives a little bit of a sense. The top 4 taps here are 4 of our most recent technical assistance panels. We worked with the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, looking at site positioning for a project in the Lower Schuylkill District. We worked with West Whiteland Township about developing a sort of town center identity in sort of a suburban commercial environment. We worked with Columbia Borough in Central PA around developing some strategies to spur private investment in their sort of downtown corridor. And then we worked with SEPTA to develop a retail strategy for the 69th Street Transportation Center. And then coming up this summer, we actually have 2 taps, one with the North Broad Renaissance and another with LaSalle University, which, if anyone is on today's call or listening to this recording and is interested in applying to serve as a panelist for one of those 2 opportunities, those applications are actually open right now for ULI members to apply for. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the recording and we'll sort of head into a Q&A for folks who are on the call live with us. But in case you are listening to this as a recording, if you do have any questions, I would certainly invite you to reach out to us. Our email address is right here, philadelphia@uli.org. As I mentioned, we do require folks before submitting an application to set up a formal meeting sort of in the final 2 weeks of April before applying. But we're always happy to set up informal conversations as well, and sort of workshop ideas and things like that too. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And if you are listening to this as a recording, we certainly invite you to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. So thank you, everyone.